She once fired a gun at Gary Cooper in a jealous rage. Another testified she'd had over 40 surgeries and was nearly blind by the end. One was secretly one of Hollywood's earliest LGBTQ+ allies, decades before it was safe to say so out loud. Another built a real estate empire while the world only saw a sex symbol. These aren't rumors from a tabloid, they're the real, buried stories behind 14 of classic Hollywood's most talked about actresses. Forget what you think you know about the scandalous starlet, cliché. Behind the headlines were businesswomen, activists, addicts, survivors of war, and women who quietly rewrote the rules of fame while the public was busy gossiping about their love lives. By the end of this video, you'll see these icons completely differently. Let's start with the woman even Hollywood called too beautiful. Elizabeth Taylor. Everyone remembers Mae West as Hollywood's original sex symbol, the sharp-tongued blonde with the innuendo-laden one-liners. But almost nobody talks about what she was doing behind the camera. In an era when studios owned every actress' body and soul, West did something almost nobody else managed. She negotiated total creative control. Her scripts, her final cut, her image. In the 1930s. As a woman, that alone should rewrite her legacy. And here's the twist nobody expects. Despite her wild public persona, West's real love life was almost boring by Hollywood standards. She spent 26 years with one man, Paul Novak, 30 years her junior, who stayed fiercely loyal until her death and never sought the spotlight. Meanwhile, she was quietly one of the first celebrities to embrace the LGBTQ+ community, featuring drag performers in her stage shows and writing a 1927 play about gay life so controversial it got shut down by censors. On top of that, she was buying up Los Angeles real estate while it was still cheap, turning herself into one of the wealthiest self-made women in Hollywood. Elizabeth Taylor's story runs on a similar hidden track. Yes, she had 8 marriages to 7 men, and yes, the tabloids never let her forget it. But look past the headlines and you find one of the first major Hollywood figures to publicly fight for AIDS research, a cause nobody wanted to touch when her close friend Rock Hudson was dying from it. She co-founded a foundation that raised millions. She also survived scoliosis, chronic pain, over 40 surgeries, and near blindness from cataracts, all while continuing to work. Her most famous relationship, with Richard Burton, is remembered for its drunken fights and dramatic reconciliations, but the two were also genuine intellectual partners, trading books on history and philosophy, with Burton writing her long, literary love letters. And Taylor herself was shrewd enough in business to launch White Diamonds, one of the best-selling celebrity perfumes ever made. Two women, two completely different public images, both far more calculated, resilient, and intelligent than the tabloids ever gave them credit for. But not every story in this list ends in triumph. Some of these women were consumed by the very fame that made them icons, starting with the woman Hollywood nicknamed the girl who was too beautiful. Barbara Lombard lived like she knew her time was short. A silent film star and screenwriter, she was famous for her looks, and infamous for treating sleep as optional, disappearing into Hollywood's party circuit night after night. She married 5 times, though even that number is disputed, since she kept several relationships hidden entirely. She died at just 29, officially from tuberculosis and kidney disease, though those close to her always believed her relentless lifestyle and drug use sped up the end. Lupe Velez, nicknamed the Mexican Spitfire, burned even brighter and crashed even harder. Her romances with Gary Cooper, Charlie Chaplin, and Clark Gable were the stuff of legend, and her relationship with Cooper was so volatile that Velez reportedly once shot at him during a fight. She eventually married Tarzan star Johnny Weissmuller, but her life ended in tragedy. In 1944, facing an unplanned pregnancy and a collapsed relationship, she died by suicide. Jane Mansfield's story follows a similar arc, decades later. Marketed as Marilyn Monroe's rival, Mansfield became one of the biggest sex symbols of the 50s and 60s, deeply embedded in the Playboy world, rumored to have crossed paths romantically with figures as powerful as John F. Kennedy. 3 marriages all collapsed under the weight of her public image and personal chaos. She died in a car accident at just 34, a life that burned out as fast as it lit up. 3 different decades, 3 different women, one disturbingly familiar pattern, fame that gave everything and then took it all back. But not every actress on this list let Hollywood write her story for her. Next up is the woman who refused to be anyone's good girl. Louise Brooks never asked for permission. A silent film icon best known for Pandora's Box, she flatly refused Hollywood's attempt to box her into the wholesome, good girl archetype every studio wanted. She was open about relationships with both men and women at a time when that alone could end a career, and she was one of the earliest actresses to publicly call out how the film industry exploited women's sexuality for profit, decades before that became a mainstream conversation. Tallulah Bankhead took that defiance even further. She called herself ambisextrous, openly refusing to label her sexuality, and had relationships with women including actress Patsy Kelly and singer Billie Holiday. But her rebellion wasn't just personal, it was political. As the daughter of a U.S. congressman and Speaker of the House, Bankhead grew up around Washington power and became an outspoken advocate for civil rights and women's rights, unafraid to use her platform in an era when actresses were expected to stay quiet. Her parties were legendary, extravagant, uninhibited, and often scandalous enough to fuel Hollywood gossip for years. But underneath the wild reputation was a woman fighting a real battle, addiction to alcohol and cocaine that steadily eroded her health. Bankhead proves that being ahead of your time and being self-destructive aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes they're the same story. Speaking of women whose private battles were hidden behind glamorous images, one actress's struggle was never with addiction, but with something far less understood in her era: her own mind. Jean Tierney lit up the screen in classics like Laura and Leave Her to Heaven, celebrated as one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood. But off-screen, her life was quietly falling apart. Her marriage to fashion designer Oleg Cassini was passionate but unstable, marked by affairs on both sides. What made her story especially tragic for its time was an undiagnosed struggle with bipolar disorder, a condition almost nobody in Hollywood understood in the 1940s, which left her dealing with erratic behavior and emotional instability largely alone. Rita Hayworth's public image as the sex goddess masked a similar private struggle. Despite being famously shy off-screen, she kept marrying powerful, domineering men, 5 marriages in total, including to Orson Welles and Prince Ali Khan. Hayworth herself later admitted she often felt used, reduced to the fantasy men projected onto her rather than seen as a person. Alcoholism compounded the pattern, making stable relationships nearly impossible to sustain. Both women were adored by millions and understood by almost no one, proof that the Hollywood glamour machine could make you a legend on screen while leaving you profoundly isolated in real life. But not every actress let herself be defined by the men around her. One of the next women on this list turned her back on Hollywood entirely, and Hollywood never fully forgave her for it. Ava Gardner had everything the Hollywood machine wanted: married to Mickey Rooney, Artie Shaw, and Frank Sinatra, celebrated as one of the most seductive women on screen. And she hated almost all of it. Gardner routinely skipped the Hollywood social scene she was supposedly the queen of, preferring her villa in Spain, where she threw herself into bullfighting and flamenco instead of premieres and parties. Her relationship with Sinatra is remembered as one of the great Hollywood love stories, but it was also genuinely toxic: jealousy, insecurity, and explosive arguments on both sides. Yet even after their divorce, Sinatra reportedly kept sending her money whenever she struggled financially. Gardner was also surprisingly self-critical about her own talent, admitting late in life that she believed her looks carried her career more than her acting ever did. Her time in Spain came with a darker footnote: her relationship with bullfighter Luis Miguel Dominguez and her decision to live abroad made her a target of FBI surveillance during the McCarthy era, suspected, without evidence, of communist sympathies. Simply choosing to live life on her own terms, outside America and outside Hollywood's expectations, was enough to make her a person of interest to the U.S. government. If you think that's an extreme reaction to a woman just wanting privacy, wait until you hear how far the government's suspicion followed some of these women, because Ava wasn't the only one operating in the shadow of scandal, manipulation, and mystery. Joan Crawford's on-screen toughness had nothing on her off-screen reputation. Years after her death, her adopted daughter's memoir Mommy Dearest exposed a private side of Crawford defined by control and alleged abuse. Professionally, she moved through relationships with Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Clark Gable, and Spencer Tracy, and married 5 times, always staying at the center of attention, which she seemed to equate directly with personal worth. Marion Davies' story is a masterclass in Hollywood double standards. She spent decades as the mistress of newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst, a relationship built on real loyalty that lasted until his death. But because it existed outside marriage, the public branded her a gold digger, rather than recognizing her as a talented comedic actress in her own right, even as rumors swirled about a possible affair with Charlie Chaplin that reportedly sent Hearst into jealous rages. Mabel Norman's story takes the darkest turn of all. A pioneering silent film comedian with brilliant comic timing, her career was overshadowed by 2 real Hollywood scandals. She was linked to the unsolved 1922 murder of director William Desmond Taylor, and her gun was reportedly the one used in a 1924 shooting of a millionaire. She was cleared both times, but the association with powerful men and public tragedy followed her for the rest of her career, alongside a private struggle with drug addiction that history remembers far more than her talent. 3 women, 3 very different kinds of power struggles, with the press, with lovers, with the law. But one actress on this list managed to turn public scandal into genuine social impact, using her fame to fight for causes nobody else in Hollywood would touch. Zsa Zsa Gabor is remembered for 9 marriages and a razor-sharp wit. "I never hated a man enough to give him his diamonds back," being one of her most famous lines. What's far less known is that she was crowned Miss Hungary in 1936, trained in an Austrian convent, and personally escaped Nazi-occupied Europe before rebuilding her life in America. Gabor understood something most of her peers didn't: fame wasn't just about the movies. She turned herself into one of the first true personal brands, decades before that phrase existed, parlaying her image into television appearances, commercials, and constant self-promotion, all while managing her finances shrewdly behind the scenes. She kept close friendships with royalty and world leaders, including a genuine bond with Elizabeth Taylor, making her an unlikely bridge between old European aristocracy and new Hollywood fame. Her final years were marked by real hardship. A 2002 car accident left her partially paralyzed, and she spent her last years bedridden. But even then, her humor never left her. She kept making headlines, including one bizarre incident where she was hospitalized after falling out of bed trying to answer the phone. Gabor's life is a reminder that the loudest, most materialistic, public personas sometimes hide the sharpest business minds. And that pattern, genius hidden behind glamour, closes out this list the same way it started: proof that Hollywood's most talked about women were almost never who the tabloids said they were.